Welcome to the Tipping Point Show. I'm Jimmy Evans. I'm excited today to have joining me best-selling author and end-time expert and a regular guest here, Bill Salus. Bill is the founder of Prophecy Depot Ministries. He's written many end-times books, produced many DVDs. He's an author and a speaker that I respect greatly, and he's here today to talk about the war that's happening in Israel right now and where he believes this is going prophetically. This is going to be... Well, Bill, you have the perspective on, Israel and Bible prophecy really like no one I've ever seen. You talk about the Psalm 83 war, Gog and Magog, all of the coming wars, the present wars. But you have a perspective, and you were on the program not too long ago talking about the Psalm 83 war specifically. But I've heard you recently talking about Zechariah 12. And this is something that I think Zechariah 12 is a very common end-time scripture that talks about Jerusalem, Judah and Jerusalem. But why don't you start by talking about your perspective on Zechariah 12 concerning the present time?
Absolutely, Jimmy. I'm watching Zechariah 12, 1 through 6 very closely because I think it's about to find fulfillment. And what it's telling us is that the Arab-Israeli conflict is going to conclude militarily, not through politically brokered peace deals. Of course, as we air this program right now, the whole world is clamoring at a fever pace for a two-state solution. But that's not biblically endorsed, and Benjamin Netanyahu and his administration are vehemently opposed to that for justifiable reasons, Jimmy.
That's exactly right. You think there's going to be a military solution in the near term?
I do, because when we look at what happened on October 7th with the Hamas massacre, it appears that Pandora's box was opened in the Middle East. The genie got out of the bottle. It's not going to be put back into the bottle, and the lid's not going to be closed on Pandora's box. I've been watching for a long time to see if some of the prophecies involving the Israeli Defense Forces, who exist in numerous biblical prophecies, I've been watching to see when those things might find their final fulfillment. And presently, I'm thinking that time is about now, Jimmy. I think that the military wars are about to happen that conclude the Arab-Israeli conflict.
Now, let's talk about kind of where we are now in kind of progressing forward. Now, so the Psalm 83 war is a war between Israel and their surrounding neighbors, okay, their immediate neighbors. And so obviously, we've seen in the news where Israel is now fighting a 7-front war, basically a 360 war. And so talk about the Psalm 83 war and what you believe is going to happen between now and when there is a military result.
Yes, I think there's a sequence of events that are probably going to happen that will conclude with the climactic war, final battle over Judah and Jerusalem in Zechariah 12. But as far as Psalm 83 goes, just for your viewers who are maybe not that familiar with it, have maybe perhaps not seen our prior programs, Psalm 83 talks about a confederacy of the Arab states and terrorist populations within them that surround Israel. It was written about 3,000 years ago by the worship leader of King David, Asaph, but who was also a prophet, we're told in 2 Chronicles 29:30. And he predicted that the time would come where Lebanon, where of course you have Hezbollah, Syria, Iraq, Jordan, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, the Palestinians, in ancient Edom now, the Palestinian refugees today, the Gaza where the Hamas are, that they would come together in a confederate effort to cut the nation of Israel off, that the name of Israel would be remembered no more. And of course we saw a precursor of that in 1948, but that did not fulfill the prophecy. So ultimately, we're looking for that prophecy to find a final fulfillment. And when it does, it enables Israel to dwell securely in the midst of the land, a peaceful, tranquil people. They can tear down the walls that they got inside of Israel and surrounding Israel. And that sets the stage for another big prophecy, Ezekiel 38 and 39, that deals with countries that are from an outer ring of countries, don't share common borders with Israel, including Russia, Turkey, and Iran, and more. And most of your viewers may be familiar with that prophecy. But that prophecy is very important because that's the one that God's going to stop supernaturally. It's too formidable of an offense for Israel to stop it with their defense forces. God will stop it with a great earthquake. That earthquake will cause panic among the troops. It says every man's sword will be against his brother. Then there'll be flooding rains, great hailstones, pestilence, and bloodshed. And of course the world will know that that was the God of the Jews that did that. And it says after God does that, that he will make his holy name known in the midst of his people Israel. They shall not profane his holy name anymore, and the nation shall know he's the Holy One of Israel. That's in Ezekiel 39:7. But we're not ready for that yet because Israel does not dwell securely. The walls are still up, and the walls serve their purpose to keep the Psalm 83 countries out from invading Israel. And I think that we're heading now for the final battle in Zechariah 12 that will conclude Psalm 83. And again, this is militarily, not politically. And so what we're seeing in all the hustle and bustle with the international community and all the clamor, a sense of urgency for a two-state solution so that Israel will normalize relationships with Saudi Arabia and all the Arab states. Well, that's just not going to happen in my estimation.
So at some point in time, there's going to be a diplomatic solution with the Antichrist. And there's going to be this answer man that comes on the scene. He makes a false peace with Israel that obviously he breaks 3.5 years into it. And you see that happening in the future pretty good. I mean, in other words, if there's going to be a Psalm 83 war and then peace, do you see the Gog-Magog war happening before the Antichrist or after?
I see Psalm 83 preceding Ezekiel 38, and I see Ezekiel 38 preceding the tribulation period for several reasons. One reason, not the primary one, was the one I just talked about. God is going to make his holy name known in the midst of his people Israel. So he's going to give the world official notice that he's the God of Israel, the covenant-keeping God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and the promise-keeping God who put their faith in Jesus Christ. And I believe he's going to do that before the Antichrist comes on the scene and tries to manipulate and influence people otherwise, thinking they should worship him and take his mark of the beast. So I think that's one of the reasons. The other reason I think it's pre-tribulation, and many of my colleagues will agree with this, is we're given a detail in Ezekiel 39 after that supernatural defeat of the enemies, that the Jewish people will be burning the weapons that these enemies bring forward, converting them into fuel for a 7-year period. Now, when you understand that 7 years as it would align itself in end times prophecies, if the Ezekiel 38 battle was defeated and stopped 3.5 years prior to the 7-year tribulation period, they'd have 3.5 years to start converting those Russian weapons to fuel. And then the first half of the tribulation, after they've signed, the Antichrist has confirmed a covenant with Israel for a 7-year period. We find it out in Daniel 9:27 and Isaiah 28 verses 15, this covenant. Then the first half of that 7-year tribulation period, Israel's dwelling in peace. Now it's a pseudo-peace because it's going to be violated at the mid part of the tribulation period when the Antichrist comes on the scene, invades Jerusalem, and goes into the temple and does the abomination of desolation. At that point, even Jesus Christ says in Matthew 24, verse 15, that the Jewish people should flee immediately into the desert, into the mountains, which would be southern Jordan, the Petra area, because Zechariah 13:8 would then come, where the Antichrist will try to commit genocide of the Jews. And it says in Zechariah 13:8 that 2/3 of the Jews will be cut off in all the land. 1/3, we're told in verse 9, will become a remnant that will make it through. So in my estimation, they could burn weapons and convert it to fuel for the first 3.5 years before the tribulation, the first 3.5 years in the first part of the tribulation, but in the second half of the tribulation, they're fleeing, they're not fighting. If anything, they're going to grab a weapon to defend themselves and not convert it to fuel.
Well, in other words, looking at the Ezekiel 38 and 39 war, for the first 3.5 years, there are no wars. They're at peace. The second half, there's no victories. In other words, they're running for their lives. There's not this, in the Ezekiel 38 and 39 war, God miraculously prevails, and the God of Israel is known throughout the earth. That doesn't happen during the tribulation, the first half or the second half, and I agree with you on that. Well, let's go back. The Israel is under incredible pressure from the world, and now the Biden administration is also ratcheting up the pressure, basically telling Israel when this Hamas war is over with, including a ceasefire before they invade Rafah, that the United States is ready to unilaterally recognize the Palestinian state. 139 nations of the United Nations already recognize the Palestinian state. And so America is now saying that we're ready to do that. I believe it was last Sunday, the cabinet, Netanyahu's cabinet, voted that they would not recognize any recognition of a two-state solution by the rest of the world. So they're under a lot of pressure. So you think that this is an opportunity now for the Israeli Defense Forces to kind of take over?
Well, like I said, I don't think there's any way to turn back the clock now with the prophecies. The stage has been set for quite some time. But at this point, I think that we're going to find the fulfillment of Psalm 83, probably Isaiah 17, the destruction of Damascus, maybe Jeremiah chapter 49, verses 34 through 39, where we see a disaster in the west coast side of Iran, another prophecy involving Iran versus Ezekiel 38. So I do see these things all coming into play. The push of the Biden administration is just putting lipstick on the same political pig. In other words, Clinton tried to do it in Camp David in 2000. That failed miserably when Ehud Barak was the prime minister and Yasser Arafat was in charge of the Palestinian Authority. George Bush tried followed those same failed presidential footsteps, 2006, 2007 time frame. John Kerry, as the Secretary of State in 2013, 2014, tried the same thing with the Obama administration. This is nothing new. In order for Saudi Arabia to normalize relationships, they're going to ask for a two-state solution. That's the big carrot. They want Saudi Arabia to join the Abraham Accords and normalize relationships with Israel. But they're going to force the Arab Peace Initiative of 2002, which they put forward, Saudi Arabia, which has some real no-goes for Israel. And it includes a new problem, too. The new problem, and I'll explain the other prerequisites of the Arab Peace Initiative, is that they want a lot of the settlements in the West Bank to be abandoned, which of course was the problem. That's what the problem with the Gaza in 2005 was. They abandoned the Gaza, and now look what they had to do to survive. They went through the massacre, and now they're fighting inside the Gaza to try to have security in the nation. But it also calls for an East Jerusalem to be the capital of the Palestinian state, a right of return of the Palestinians back into all of Israel proper, not just the West Bank. And also for Israel to concede the land that they acquired in the Six-Day War of 1967. So in other words, give us land and we'll give you peace, as if Saudi Arabia is going to be able to control and normalize. And the carrot on this is that Saudi Arabia says, well, the Arab states will start to normalize relationships with Israel and be at peace with them. But there's no way that Saudi Arabia is going to be able to contain and control the vast majority of Muslims that absolutely hate Israel.
Absolutely.
There's no way that's going to happen.
Okay, Bill, we'll pick up there in just a second. Let me say, if you're watching right now and you're not a subscriber to endtimes.com, I want you to become a subscriber. And right now we have a 7-day free trial that you can sign up for endtimes.com. Try us out for 7 days. You can see the full Tipping Point show that you're watching today without ads. Also on Thursday, we have Mark Hitchcock, who's one of the greatest end times experts in the world today. He has a podcast here on endtimes.com every Thursday. Brian Schrager from Israel every Tuesday. I give a prophecy perspective every Monday. We answer questions every Friday. And I have a devotional that comes out every Sunday. We have all kinds of things that come out all week long to keep you encouraged, to keep you blessed and educated on what's happening in the world today, especially related to the end times. So go to endtimes.com right now, sign up for a free trial for 7 days. And after the 7 days, if you want to stay with us, it's $7 a month. It's the best $7 I believe that you could ever spend to keep yourself encouraged in the severe times that we're living in times when Bible prophecy is coming true right before our eyes. $7 a month, but you have a 7-day free trial right now at endtimes.com. Let's go back to Bill. And Hamas is extremely popular among all Palestinians, not just in Gaza. And the Palestinians want Hamas to rule them rather than the Palestinian Authority. Can you imagine a worse nightmare for Israel than to have a state recognized alongside of them, which now puts Hamas in East Jerusalem, in the West Bank, and in Gaza? So it's just a nightmare. Well, let's go to Zechariah 12, Bill. And so you have I so much appreciate your perspective on all end-time prophecy. But Zechariah 12 through 14 is a very, very important end-time prophecy. Give us what you're looking at related to the fulfillment of that.
I will, and I want to caveat that what I'm about to say as I go through these first 6 verses of Zechariah 12, that most scholars for the ages and even today believe that what I'm about to say is related to Armageddon. Or I believe it's not. I believe it's a separate and entirely different siege that takes place inside of Judah and Jerusalem versus the one that happens in Zechariah chapter 14, verses 1 through 3, which is dealing with all the nations that captured Jerusalem, those passages, and time permitting, we can compare that. So what I'm about to do is lay out the first 6 verses as I interpret them. I ask your viewers not to take my word for it, but at the same token, I do think this could be actually what we should be watching for. I think it will lead to the final solution of the conflict of the Arab-Israeli age-old conflict, and I think that we're heading toward that in the very near future. So what it says in Zechariah 12, verses 2 and 3, verses 2 says, "Behold, I will make Jerusalem a cup of trembling," or in some translations, intoxication, unto all the peoples round about the surrounding nations, when they lay siege, when they shall be in the siege both against Judah and against Jerusalem. So we have a siege that's forthcoming, and it's not involving all the nations of the world. It's involving the surrounding nations. Every translation that you look at will tell you it's involving the surrounding nations. And the Hebrew word is sabiev. And it clearly talks about the neighborhood, the neighbors around Israel. The surrounding nations at some point are going to lay a final siege against Judah and Jerusalem. Now it's going to be an unsuccessful siege, and I'll tell you why in just a moment. But that is what they're going to do. Remember, Jerusalem is the 3rd holiest city in Islam. Of course, it's where the Temple Mount is, and the Dome of the Rock, and the Al-Aqsa Mosque. And even though it's not mentioned at one time in the Quran, they still hold fast to the fact that that's their 3rd holiest city. Now, when this siege takes place, the international community is going to go in an uproar and meddle. And it says in the next verse, "And in that day I shall make Jerusalem a burdensome stone for all people, all that burden themselves with it," all those that meddle, the United Nations, the international community, etc., that meddle with it, "shall be cut into pieces, though all peoples of the earth will be gathered," or in some translations, assembled against it. So what I see happening there is that the Arab states, the surrounding peoples, are going to make a final ditch effort to take over Israel, namely Judah and Jerusalem, the capital. And they're going to try to lay siege, and they're going to have support, the full support of the international community. To do that, the international community is going to meddle. God saying, "Don't do that. I'm making Jerusalem a cup of trembling. I'm making it a cup of trembling. Don't get involved. It's going to be a burdensome stone. If you attempt to, it will sorely wound you or cut you into pieces," in some translations. So that's what the stage is being set for. Now we currently see, I'm going to give you an example. This is where most people would say, well, it says all nations, Bill, in verse 3. Why can't there be all the nations in Zechariah chapter 14 or Joel 3 or Armageddon in Revelation 19 or Revelation 16? And I'll give you some quotes in a moment. But I think what we need to understand here is in modernity, there's precedence for the international community meddling with Judah and Jerusalem, especially Jerusalem. I'll talk a little bit about the history if I can, Jimmy, and we'll see how it's more than intensified now than ever, like you mentioned with the Biden administration and the whole world clamoring for a 2-state solution. But we start back in 1947 with UN Resolution 181, which was the partition plan, which called for Israel to become a nation. The United Nations approved that. 1948, of course, the Arabs didn't vote for the Israel to become a nation. They voted against it. And they went to war against Israel in 1948. But in the UN Resolution 181, it called for Israel to be restored as a nation, but Jerusalem is to be an international zone. They were already meddling even back when Israel became a nation. Of course, in 1967, the Six-Day War, Israel won that war. Egypt, Jordan, and Syria had joined from the Islamic 83 countries, and Israel won that war in 6 days. And they took over all of Jerusalem. Oh, excuse me, let me backtrack. After the war in 1948, I got ahead of myself. There was the Armistice Agreement, where they actually divided Jerusalem in half. Israel won the war in 1948. Jerusalem got divided in half, the first time ever, and that's not biblically endorsed. Jerusalem was never to be a divided city. And it didn't last more than 20 years, because in 1967, going back to what I was saying, in the Six-Day War, Israel won and took over all of Jerusalem, and no longer was it a divided city. However, Israel made the colossal mistake of giving control of the Temple Mount to Jordan, the WAQ, W-A-Q-F, Antiquities Society. So we already see meddling has gone on in 1948, 1949, 1967. We saw the presidents of America, we talked about this earlier, trying to create a two-state solution, and now it's come to a fever pitch where they want to make Jerusalem divide Jerusalem and give it a two-state solution and give East Jerusalem to the Palestinians as a capital. Now that's only going to get worse when this siege happens. The international community is going to be, it appears to be, they're going to side more and more with the attackers, the Arab countries that surround Israel. And God says don't do that. It'll be a burdensome stone.
Now, Bill, how can people get more information about your ministry? Where do they go?
Well, thank you, Jimmy. It's been wonderful to do this show with you, as usual. They can reach me at prophecydepot.com, Prophecy Depot like Home Depot. Got videos that I've done, some of yours we've got on there. We've also got a YouTube channel. If you search YouTube under Bill Salus, S-A-L-U-S, or Prophecy Depot, D-E-P-O-T. And subscribe to our YouTube channel as well. We're growing there with all kinds of videos. I've got articles and things, my books, and we have a product online bookstore there. The Future World Prophecies, my latest book, is available there with the DVD, and that's prophecydepot.com.
Well, you've got some fantastic books and DVDs. I really encourage everybody to go on your site there, your YouTube channel. Bill, thank you. You're a dear friend, and thank you for being with me today, and we'll have you on again in the future. You're always a great comfort and encouragement in these times, kind of helping us to understand what's going on. God bless you.
God bless you, Jimmy.
Hey, listen, if you're watching this right now on YouTube and you're not a subscriber to endtimes.com, I want you to become a subscriber. Go there, endtimes.com, for $7 a month. You can become a subscriber. You get everything that we do here at endtimes.com. We have several podcasts every week. I answer questions. I give devotionals. I give perspective. In these severe times that we're living in, it's just good to have someone to encourage you and educate you on constantly changing events that are happening in the world right now. Go to endtimes.com. We have a 7-day free trial if you want to check us out. If not, just go ahead and sign up. $7 a month. It will bless you. It will bless us. We love it when people become subscribers because you give us the financial basis through which we can continue coming back to you and also expand this ministry. Thank you for joining me today. It's my great pleasure to have joining me today Jan Markell. She is founder and director of Olive Tree Ministries, a ministry dedicated toward helping believers understand the times and be watchmen on the wall with an end-time perspective. She's also the host of Understanding the Times radio program that now airs weekly on 900 radio stations and around the world electronically. Jan, thank you for joining me today.
Jimmy, thank you for having me.
It's always great to have you on the show. You're very well respected. I know a lot of our subscribers and viewers, they think highly of you, and we have a little online community at endtimes.com, and they'll make comments about different people, and they comment about you all the time, quoting you. You know, and I was looking forward to having you on the show today because I have never seen this kind of world like you. I've studied end-time prophecy for a long time, but it just seems to me, Jan, that on October 7th, there was just something that happened. It was just like a boil was lanced. And we're just seeing the world has changed. What is your perspective of October 7th and what's changed since then?
Yeah, for one of my newsletters, shortly after that, 2-3 weeks after that, the opening article, I just titled it, The Day That Changed the World Forever. And I know not everyone totally comprehends that because that's a blunt statement. What do you mean, change the world forever? I mean, it's not a world war. A nuclear bomb wasn't dropped. Well, why did it change the world forever? And the reason I say that and continue to say it, and obviously as do you, is I think, and I was on air talking about it right after that, I think demons were unleashed that day. Demons obviously in Israel were unleashed, but Jimmy, clearly they're unleashed on the whole world because the whole world is now in Israel derangement syndrome. And that has to be a demonic thing. And therefore, I believe the demons targeted Israel, southern Israel, etc., the Jewish people in Israel. They targeted, but, they just funneled out to every major capital in the world because then, and we continue to see it's died down a little bit, but these global demonstrations, hate Israel, and who are they cheering for? Hamas. Yeah. Whoever thought we would be in a world where barbarians are cheered And I have to ask, is this sort of setting the stage for the Antichrist, who will be the ultimate barbarian, and the world will be cheering him as well?
Well, the deception, when the Antichrist comes, 2 Thessalonians 2 says that, Satan will come with all power, signs, and lying wonders, right before the Antichrist comes. The deception in the world today, it's just on every level. Yeah. You talked about Hamas. Hamas they're rock stars in the Arab world today. Only 5% of the Arab world condemns what Hamas did on October 7th. And if this was an article in the Jerusalem Post, if there was a free election held today with the Palestinians in the West Bank and in Jerusalem, they would vote Hamas to rule them. And so as the world is trying to force Israel into a two-state solution, literally, they're trying to force them into a two-state solution with people who want to destroy them. It's crazy.
See, the world is upside down, and I guess we shouldn't be surprised because we're trending towards the tribulation, and as a result, nothing makes sense because we're preparing for the Antichrist. You and I are never going to see him, thankfully, but much of the world is, and I wish much of the world were paying attention, even listening to our discussion, not suggesting it's the world's most profound, but I do think we're telling some truth here that not everybody is, and that, there's a saying that if you want to understand the last days, the clock is Israel, the minute hand is Jerusalem, the temple hand, or the second hand is the Temple Mount.
That's right.
Therefore, if we're trying to understand the times from an end time perspective, folks just have to understand this little nation the size of New Jersey in the heart of the Middle East. And quite frankly, Jimmy, probably 80% of our churches or more, they don't address it. They have no intention of addressing, nor do they consider the fact that the king is coming. That's just not on their pulpit agenda.
And there was a pastor that last year he got in his pulpit and he said, "I'm just so sick of all this talk about the end times. I don't. Well, 30% of the Bible is prophecy, and most of that's end time prophecy." The Lord, one out of 30 verses in the New Testament talks about the return of Jesus. The Lord put a lot in there for us pastors and Bible teachers so that we could prepare people for the end times. And it's amazing to me that most churches won't talk about it, most pastors won't talk about it. And it's really why the Lord raised you up and raised me up and people like us. I truly believe one of the purposes of my life is to herald the return of Jesus and to keep people encouraged. Now, the reality, Jan, this is the way I feel right now. I started teaching on Bible prophecy 41 years ago. This is the world that I always envisioned at the very end. I wake up today and I'm just thinking, Jesus has to come soon. I don't set dates. He's got to come soon.
Exactly. Yeah, no, I started about that time too, almost exactly the same years ago. But I never thought back then that we'd be saying what we're saying now. And so it's a privilege, it's a challenge, but it's a privilege to be born for such a time as this, even though, and I know believers, I know many, even who are viewing this as we speak, because of the stress and tension of being a part of the last generation before the church departs. They're going through terrible testings and trials and heartaches, and we all have them. I'm going through some of my own as well, and I think the devil is just trying to take Israel out, trying to take the believers out. I'm not sure. It's a 1-2 punch. I think first Israel, and then he's after the Christians. So, and that's a prophecy in the Bible. And Jesus says you'll be hated by all nations for my name's sake. And I think that's a reference to Jews and Christians being hated in the last days. We see it.
It's unbelievable. So I love what you just said. You said that the clock is Israel, the minute hand is Jerusalem, the second hand is the Temple Mount. Talk about I totally agree with that. I've never heard that before. I love that. The Temple Mount, they have the red heifers, and one of the pretext of Hamas on October 7th was protecting the Temple Mount. Do you think there's a real possibility of Israel rebuilding the temple anytime soon?
Well, I personally think the Antichrist will have to be on the scene before they can rebuild. That's my own personal opinion. But I think what folks don't know, and it's such a key kind of ingredient here, is one of the reasons for the Hamas attack is they are very upset that the little red heifers, there are 4 of them now, the holy cows, as I call them, the holy cows are ready for even for Passover. And my understanding is one will be sacrificed near Passover. Obviously, they don't have the Temple Mount yet, but they're still going to do it perhaps on the Mount of Olives. So this is one of the main reasons Hamas struck Israel is over these holy cows. I mean, this is astounding because even they now see the importance of a coming temple. We call it the tribulation temple. The Antichrist will go in it and declare himself God to Israel at the 3.5 year point of the tribulation. But listen, Jimmy, if Hamas understands that, why do our churches not understand that?
Right.
That's kind of shocking.
That's shocking. Well, so now I'm going to pick your brain here because I've done all the research I can do on the holy cows. I like the way you say that, the holy cows. So you say now there's 4 of them. Is it your understanding that one has been found kosher?
I believe they all have. I believe all 4. One was disqualified, or maybe he died. I don't know. Since they're young, maybe he was just disqualified. But there are 4. My radio guest, as we speak, my radio guest is Mando Gonzalez, and he's written a book on the Temple Mount and the red heifers and all of that. And he says all 4 qualify, the remaining 4 qualify. So they're set to go Passover, and something's going to happen Passover. But again, Hamas tried to stop that. Ultimately, I don't think they will, but ultimately it gets down to that Temple Mount. That's what they're upset about. You know, a little, what is it? I don't know, 40 acre? I mean, it's not very big. We've all been there. It's not very big. And yet it seems like the target, the bullseye of the world is that Temple Mount. And, you know, there have been 2 temples. There's going to be a 3rd and then a 4th. And I've been in it, and I'm sure you have too. And, you know, it's kind of creepy to even be over circulating around it or inside of it and take your shoes off and all that. But nonetheless, that is ground zero. That's my only point.
Yes,
that is ground zero.
Yes, it is. So I love that you said that because, see, the Mishnah, which is the, written record of the oral tradition of the Jews, says that there have been 9 red heifers sacrificed since Moses, that the next one will be the 10th, and the Jews believe that the 10th one will usher in the era of the Messiah. And so,
and they may be right.
well, I mean, if this happens in April, I think April 22nd, right around in there is the Passover this year. So we're looking at maybe 6 weeks from right now, we could have the 10th red heifer, and they've got the land to sacrifice. They have everything ready that they need.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And with the red heifer, they would be able to cleanse the Temple Mount, to cleanse the priest and all that.
Well, again, we're living in historic times, and I know your followers understand that, and I believe mine do as well. I mean, we're trying to get, the rest of the church ignited to be excited about the times that we live in. I mean, it's a privilege and a challenge to be born for such a time as this, because, I just said if demons were unleashed, they're unleashed against us as well. I mean, the devil hates us as much as he hates the Jews, and that's why I think we're at a time and going to intensify of just incredible satanic pushback in the life of every believer. They already experience it, but it could get worse.
Hope you're enjoying the show today. We're going to go right back to Jan Markell. Let me just say we have a 7-day free trial. If you're not a subscriber, go to endtimes.com. You can have a free trial for 7 days. Check us out. We have got Mark Hitchcock, who has a podcast every week. We also have Brian Schrager, who is our correspondent from Israel, who has an update on Israel every single week. Articles, questions that we answer. I have a devotional that comes out every Sunday. We also have all of this archived. Go on endtimes.com. There's a 7-day free trial. We would love for you to become a subscriber and a part of our family. We also have an online community. They talk to each other. They pray for each other. Tipping Point and endtimes.com is a lot more than just this podcast. It's a community of believers who encourage each other and stand together waiting for the coming of Jesus. And so go right now to endtimes.com. 7-day free trial. We want you to check us out and become a subscriber. You will love it. It will be something that encourages you, and tell other people about it too. We're going to go back now to Jan Markell. Well, anti-Semitism is not an ideology because you can't articulate it. No one can. It's a spirit. It's a demonic spirit. And it's a spirit of hatred that we see. And like you said, it's just hatred toward Israel, hatred toward the church, and especially hatred toward the Word of God. It's just this unbelievable hatred. So, Jan, do you believe, like right now, we're talking about October 7th, are there any specific end-time prophecies? Because you were talking about being hated by all nations. You can check that box. I mean, that's never been as true as it is right now. Are there any specific prophecies? For example, Psalm 83 is the war between Israel and her immediate neighbors. Do you believe that this is a part of that?
Well, it certainly could be. Some feel that Psalm 83 is an imprecatory prayer and not a war, and I don't know that we know that. But I think there are some other incredible things happening surrounding all of this. Number one, I see one of the greatest, fallout from October 7th is the Jews are going back to Israel in record number. They don't feel safe in London. They don't feel safe in New York. Now, they're not all going back, but far more than before that date. So we have Aliyah happening, I think probably almost unprecedented level. And isn't that sad? I mean, they had to face a catastrophe to get them to go back, but that's what's caused many to do that. So, Jimmy, when we look at signs of the times, I mean, there are just so many. I think, and I was interviewing Jack Hibbs very recently, and we discussed something found in Isaiah. I'm blanking out. Isaiah 17, and that would be the obliteration of Damascus. And I think we need to be keeping our eye on Damascus right now. I know we're watching Lebanon, and we're watching even some of the West Bank, and even obviously Gaza. But I think something could happen with Israel having to strike Damascus, and I think that would unleash a lot. That could even unleash Gog Magog. It could be tied in with, and I hope not, but if it does, then we have a catastrophe up ahead, tied in with Israel striking Iran. Does she have a choice? Iran has declared war on her. Does she have a choice?
Well, Iran right now is testing these ballistic missiles to strike the Air Force bases in Israel. They're doing it publicly. They are publicizing their practice of striking Israel, and I've read reports that they're weeks away from nuclear material. Who knows where they are. But it's an existential threat to Israel, and as difficult of a situation that Israel is in. See, Jeremiah 49 is the prophecy of Elam, Elam being destroyed. Well, I don't know, Bill Salas, we both know Bill, and Bill is an expert in those things. But if Israel struck Iran, they would strike probably southern Iran, which is Elam. That's where a lot of their nuclear facilities are and their launchers are. The interesting thing about Jeremiah 49, it says, I'm going to knock the bow out of your hand, your launchers out of your hand. So like you, I just think that it's just a matter of time. Now, I think it was last week Israel struck a couple of natural gas plants in Iran, and it was pretty significant. But you just wonder how much longer they can wait before they do that. And of course, that's going to cause World War III, Russia, China, all that stuff.
Exactly. And here's my concern for the immediate, let's say 2024. And you asked about, signs that we're paying attention to, and I think one of the biggest ones would be that the world lacks a leader and America lacks a leader. But see, they're tapping into that. The evil world is tapping into that, and that's why everything's hitting the fan right now, because there's not a lot of pushback from our White House. And I think the question is, and I think part B of that is, I think that the enemies of freedom are fearing our next election, and that there could be a change and somebody could come in who will push back. Now, that's not a political statement at all. That's just facts on the ground.
Yes, it is.
Mr. Biden just does not, my goodness, I'm glad we're striking some Houthi targets right now in Yemen, but this is so much bigger and so much more serious than Yemen. And when does China go after Taiwan? My hunch is they have to do it in the coming few months. Again, take advantage of America without a strong leader, take advantage of a whole world that doesn't have a strong leader. Can you name one in Europe who just stands out and we say, oh, everybody's paying attention to whoever, Margaret Thatcher or whatever, but it seems that those people are gone. So we are in a time of unprecedented perilous times. And that's partly because America has fallen off she's gone into almost oblivion. And will she come back? I mean, I don't know the future. She could, but it's awfully late.
Well, President Biden could not have done more to help Iran than he has done.
Exactly. Billions of dollars.
Billions of dollars, and just playing kid glove, really preferring them in many ways and giving them the ability to do what they're doing right now without ever striking them back. Iran is the only ones that really haven't been struck. Everybody else, Israel, America, everybody's been struck except for them. So let me ask you, so there is a eclipse coming up on April the 8th, which is the second eclipse. The first one was in 2017. The second one's coming up April 8th, which marks an X over America. It's a very ominous thing. It happened in the 19th century, early 19th century, and there were massive earthquakes in the central region of the United States. There was one eclipse that happened in 1918, and 650,000 Americans died of the Spanish flu. So if God sets signs in the sun, moon, and stars, that's what Jesus said, it seems as though this is a very ominous sign for America. We don't know exactly what's going to happen, but the first eclipse was in 2017, and since then we've had COVID. And so do you have any thoughts about the eclipse coming up April 8th?
No, I don't, but as you said, Jesus talks about signs in the heavens, and I do think we need to pay attention to them now. You can go way overboard and suddenly everything in the sky means this and this and this. But he didn't say that for no reason at all. He said that because there's some meaning to what's going on in the heavens. So I do think that we need to pay attention to these things without going overboard. Please, you don't have to write a book about everything that's going to come up here, but at least be paying attention. I mean, I think today, Jimmy, we need to pay attention to everything that may have been kind of ordinary a few years ago.
Yeah.
Our times aren't the same. They all changed on October the 7th. Everything is different since then. So I just say, so let's pay attention. Absolutely.
And we're vulnerable. America.
We're so vulnerable.
Hope you enjoyed today's podcast. Listen, go to endtimes.com, become a subscriber for $7 a month. We would love to have you become a subscriber and get everything, the show that you saw today, get it ad-free. The entire show that we only show to subscribers on endtimes.com. Plus we have other podcasts, much more information, $7 a month. It's an absolute bargain. Go there right now and sign up. I want you to be a part of our online community, encouraging each other, being encouraged and enlightened about what's happening in these very severe days that we're living in. Also, you can support us with a one-time gift or a recurring gift. Go to endtimes.com. You can contribute there. Any gift that you give is so appreciated. Many people give to us every single month. It is a huge blessing to us, and it helps us to bring this message back to you and also to other people around the world. And we're trying to spread the message farther and farther because people are discouraged. Many people are overwhelmed. That's what's happening in the world. And we have the answer. It's the gospel of Jesus Christ and its end-time prophecy. Thank you for tuning in today. I'll see you next time.